standards prohibit GM crops. We don't dispute that. We have concerns about the impact on farmers of GM because they no longer have control over their inputs and their seed. They're dependent on major commercial companies who have to sell them that seed. We are concerned that consumers do not want fair trade, so we advise farmers that the fair trade system will, no, I'm sorry, I haven't started, will not accept GM crops. But we have something like 65 standards in the fair trade system, and every year about 20 of those are reviewed. And it will not stay like that forever because fair trade is a pragmatic system. And if there is a need and a reality for fair trade to accept GM crops, we will not have a problem to do that if it works in the interests of the poor. And that gets right to the heart of this spurious opposition between these two models at the moment. We do not say that we have the only answer to these solutions. We believe we have something that complements market in areas where market fails. And our opponents here cannot accept that there is anything such as a failure of the market. So let's get some practical experience. We're told that fair trade's unfair because it benefits some farmers at the expense of others. That there's only a finite amount of money available to buy coffee, apparently. So if one farmer gets $1 more, another farmer's going to get $1 less. Well, you don't have to be an economist to check this out. Go to Starbucks. Right? And I can tell you, coffee prices now are the highest they've been for 15 years. So I'd suggest if you're going to Starbucks to buy coffee, you get there early in the morning. Because presumably they will have sold out by lunchtime. Will they? No, of course they won't. They're buying the same amount of coffee now at a higher price than they were before. The reality is that by helping small farmers to organise and cooperate in marketing their crops, fair trade brings competition into local markets.
On that point,
into local markets, and we have evidence that farmers in all the region get more because local buyers have to compete with a fair trade buyer.
We weren't arguing that higher prices means coffee is going to run out. We were saying that higher prices means there will be a glut on the market. There will be more coffee available than there is demand for coffee.
I've already addressed that question. It's simply not true. The reality is that there are no farmers who are harmed by fair trade. This is a typical example of what John Maynard Keynes described about economics. They can't be satisfied with something that works in practice. They have to prove that it works in theory. Fair trade's accused of being unfair because it does not aid economic development. It condemns the poor to continuing in this forms of inefficient, unsustainable production. And yes, I'd have to say, if we operated on the basis that every farmer had a God-given right in perpetuity to pursue their traditional forms of production and have a guaranteed right to sell it and have a guaranteed minimum price, we'd be guilty. But we don't do that. And if people would look at what we do, they would find we don't do that. We recognise that farmers, just like the rest of us, have to change to meet the challenges of globalisation. We know that they need to invest in improving yields, in quality, in diversification, in alternative marketing channels. We know that some farmers do not have a long-term future in farming. For them, the most important thing is that they can educate their children so they grow up with better life choices. Everything I've just mentioned is about long-term investment. And I don't know any way that people can invest for the long term when they can't be sure of putting food on the table tomorrow. That's where fair trade helps them. Fair trade is condemned as unfair to consumers because it's an inefficient way of providing aid. Yes, a small proportion of what you pay out of your pack of tea or coffee or bananas actually goes back to the developing world. Yes, and of course that's so much worse than most of the aid in the world, which, as we know, is organised by rich governments employing expensive consultants, working with senior civil servants, handing out grand projects to companies who probably use bribery to get the projects and deliver them, and then use the free trade regime to avoid paying their fair share of tax. Yes, it's a great way of distributing money. Unfortunately, it doesn't go to the poor, it goes to bank accounts in Cayman Islands and Liechtenstein. Fair trade isn't about paying 10p extra at the supermarket to get your bananas and they hand it out beneficially to some farmer somewhere. It's about a different way of trading that promotes long-term sustainable business for everyone. That's why 4 out of 7 supermarkets in Britain are now selling fair trade bananas as standard. Why? Because it's a better way of trading in bananas. And then we're told it's unfair because there's a moral superiority over free trade as a poverty reduction strategy. But again, I have to say, it misrepresents our position. I'm not against free trade. I think free trade would be a wonderful idea. It would be great if we had free trade. I also think it would be great if Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy and the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow existed. But I don't live my life as though they do. I'd be an idiot if I did that. And I'm asking you to say a vote against this motion is not a vote against free trade. It's a vote against the idea that free trade is the only way of helping people escape from poverty. I understand what's happening in India. Free trade is doing a great job of helping people in the car industries, in the software industries, engine creations of wealth in India. That's terrific. That's why there are no fair trade schemes there. We don't interfere where we're not wanted. But India also has a lot of poverty. We've had reports in the past year of workers on tea estates in West Bengal having to kill rats for food. In the 21st century, that is not fair. And the idea that globalisation provides opportunities in one fell swoop for illiterate peasants to move into high-tech industries is absolutely ludicrous. Their children may do, but those children have to go to school and be educated. And again, that's where fair trade helps. And I think it's really ironic that fair trade attracts criticisms from those who claim to believe in free trade. Because, as my colleague said, nobody's forced to join a fair trade cooperative, nobody's forced to buy a product, and we wouldn't want it any other way. We're proud of the market success that we've had by offering consumers the chance to make a difference. And on every other issue, my colleagues here would be passionately advocating the rights of people to do what they want. The customer is right, say the free traders. The customer is right is something I learnt in business, absolutely. But when it doesn't suit their dogma, suddenly the customer is wrong. Misguided.
Would you favour then getting rid of the restrictions on genetic modification that the governments impose?
I think people should have the information and be able to make an informed choice.
On that point, do you believe providing people misinformation is unfair? Do you believe providing people wrong information is unfair?
It's not unfair, it's just wrong. But if you... So all the counts I mentioned against the criticism of fair trade, I submit that I prove these charges to be groundless. They're based on misunderstandings, misrepresentation, outdated, prejudicial data, and they're based on putting rigid economic dogma before objective empirical observation. Now, I accept that they're based on good intentions. We've already heard that a fair trade is accused of good intentions, but as we know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We need more than that. My experience with colleagues around the world on fair trade shows that we are actually doing some good. I cannot ignore that evidence of my own eyes for the sake of textbook economics. So I must ask you to reject this motion, and I think you should reject it in the best traditions that I understand of this House. I could even ask you to reject it in the name of the English language that this House holds dear, because if fair trade is unfair, then it's an oxymoron. It's an impossibility. And since it patently does exist, there are 3,000 products in the UK market. British consumers spend £10 million a week on fair trade product. You can't wish it away so lightly. But I'm not going to ask you to do that, because that's pedantry. That's just rhetoric. But I have to say it's a brilliant plug for Fair Trade Fortnight, which still runs until Sunday, and which can be enjoyed at all good purveyors of food and drink in this very city. So, I'm going to ask you to reject this motion on two grounds. One is the name of rational discourse, because this motion seeks to deny that by dismissing fair trade simply because it runs counter to orthodox dogma. And ultimately, I'm also going to ask you to reject it in the name of justice. Free trade comes from a noble tradition, which I've got every respect for, in seeking efficiency and freedom from government interference in our affairs where it's unwarranted. And long may it do that. But I don't believe it's equipped to deliver justice.